answer the question.
Let me finish my sentence.
No, Mehdi, it's not your show. It's mine. I wanted to say that the whole interview. I mean, the thing I do want to ask you, I don't think you've called Hamas terrorists. In fact, you've gone out of your way to call them fighters. Do you still think that, or do you accept that what they did on October the 7th was an act of terrorism on a heinous scale, and therefore you have to call them terrorists?
So you're wrong, Piers. In my very first MSNBC monologue after October 7th, I referred to what happened on October 7th as terrorism.
Just to be clear, it was an act of terrorism, and Hamas are terrorists. That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians and kidnapped babies, certainly I would call them terrorists.
Right.
Just as I call Israeli soldiers who kidnap children and kill children terrorists. I use the terrorist label more freely because otherwise it's just a politicized, empty phrase that we just apply to our enemies. What I would say, Piers, is that I find it a problem, and you know this, you've joked about all the memes about you, this obsession with what we call Hamas, which is a question you pose. Let's be honest, Piers, to most of your pro-Palestinian brown guests. You don't ask your Israeli or Jewish or pro-Israeli guests to condemn Israeli terrorism or Israeli war crimes at the start of an interview in the way you do.
Well, no, I've been asked directly. I've been asked directly whether I think Israel are terrorists, and I've said no. So I don't think they are. I think they had a right to defend themselves. The question is the scale.
That wasn't the point I made, Piers.
No, and I think it's the wrong mindset.
Here's my problem with that. Why is that not applied to your Israeli guests? I would be fine, Piers, if you had Palestinian guests and you begin by asking them, do you condemn Hamas war crimes? Because what Hamas did on October 7th was a war crime. But then you should start with Israeli guests and pro-Israeli guests saying, do you condemn Israeli war crimes, which have been documented by the UN, every human rights group on the planet? You don't. You had Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, on a couple of weeks ago. I watched the interview. Your opening question was, how comfortable are you with the way Israel's prosecuting the war? Right. Bit of a softball to start with. You didn't ask him to condemn Israeli terrorism, Israeli war crimes, Israeli genocide in Gaza. So a lot of people look at that and they say, they get your intention, but it comes across as a bit of a racist double standard.
Well, when did Israel kill?
What we need to have is.
Well, hang on. When did Israel kill 1,200
When did Israel
Palestinians?
kill hundreds of Palestinian civilians?
When did they kill 800 Palestinian civilians in one few-hour period? Right, in the way that Hamas killed those Israelis.
But that's not the definition of terrorism, how many hours you do it in. I can mention many Israeli massacres going back to Sabra and Shatila, which they oversaw, going back to Kibbutz and Ariel Sharon, going back to Deir Yassin, where rape and violence happened. The point is not to compare atrocities. The point, Piers, is to have a consistent moral principle, which is to say, if you kill civilians for a political cause, you are a terrorist. On that basis, Hamas have committed acts of terror and Israel have committed acts of terror. I think that's only fair to say that.
Yeah, listen, you're perfectly entitled to say it. Of course you are.
And that's why so many of us who are critics of Israel say, let us disentangle the political ideology of Zionism being pushed in the occupied territories from Judaism, one of the world's great religions, which is not responsible for the crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu or Bezalel Smotrich.